It probably will not be long before they are deployed. It is a specialty mission. What they will be doing is going after specific targets, long-range targets, over in Kosovo. Now, we have some animation, if we can show you that, exactly how that mission would work. That's an MLRS, multiple launch rocket system. It fires a missile that goes out and would quell or put down the ground defenses. These are multiple rockets that it hits down on the ground. The Apache would then fly out in its mission, suppressing ground fire along the way, and then it would take out its target. A Hellfire missile fired at a tank, exactly the role that this was designed for, and as it comes back...
Well, this is certainly the most devastating piece of ground equipment. There are tanks, there are British, German and French tanks in Macedonia, but in Albania this is a very smart piece of equipment. It has a range, depending on the type of warhead and weapon it's used, of about 200 kilometers. Of course, they won't always be stuck in the ditch just outside the airport. That gives you an indication of the problems there are, however, in getting heavy equipment across the mountains into Kosovo. If this is just outside Tirana, just think what the problems that NATO would have if they wanted to move up and resupply close to the borders.
These work in harness with the Apaches?
Yes, they do, absolutely. Basically, they can clear areas either side. Each of the salvo of rockets can destroy everything in an area of 1 kilometer square. So if they know there are no civilians there, they can create if you like, dead areas alongside where the Apaches will fly in, and then the Apaches can destroy tanks there, which they can see individually. The Apache's not very fast, it doesn't need to be. It goes in low, slow, and hits targets.
With the aircraft at Belgrade airfield in order to prevent NATO targeting. Actually, it's not close, but it's underneath the tail of the civilian aircraft. You can see it from the shadow. With the benefit of better weather, until yesterday, we have been building an improved picture of the fate of displaced people in Kosovo. This map is not that easy to see, but you can see the flames in white. Finally, this composite picture shows the possible mass grave sites at Itvika and Pusto Selo. As we stated yesterday, the similarities between the two sites can be seen. And the difference between what we have seen in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Was operating at, they appeared to be military-style vehicles, and it appeared to be a military-style vehicle and matched the size and shape of the other vehicles in this small group. I want to reiterate, however, it was the association of the vehicle with the house burnings that made it a legitimate target. Prior to reviewing the video presentation of his attack, let me explain the infrared imagery. If you'd run the tape, please. In the center of the imagery, you see the targeting cursor. That's the intended endpoint. This is infrared imagery. Stop the tape. And is shown in the cockpit in shades of green. As you can see, he targeted a single vehicle at 1110 and struck it directly with a 500-pound laser-guided bomb. After the attack, he had departed the area to refuel and passed the coordinates of his attack to another flight entering the area. That flight was Bear 41. Next slide. In the interim, an unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV, transitioned through this area and imaged the site of Bear 21's attack. We'll now view the videotape of that imagery, and you can see the vehicle that has been damaged with other vehicles gathered around it, and a very distinct C-shaped building complex in this area that was also shown in some Serbian TV video released on the day of this attack. Please roll the video. In the center of the screen, you may be able to see the crater from his initial attack. The camera will pan over to this C-shaped vehicle, and you will see large vehicles in the courtyard of the building complex. There they are, now coming to the left center of the screen. Stop the tape, please. Next slide. Bear 4-1, as I said, entered the area and visually assessed the target area for over 10 minutes. He saw these large vehicles in the courtyard of the C-shaped complex I pointed out earlier, and he made the determination that they were likely to be military vehicles. He designated them as a target, and Bear 4-2 attacked them with a single GBU-12. As you watch the next video, note the area at the top of the screen. There's a large secondary explosion that in the assessment of our analysts is indicative of an accelerant, such as gasoline, being present in the structure. We have reports of Serbs hiding gasoline inside of homes, which they use to refuel their vehicles or to burn Kosovar Albanian houses. Additionally, we have seen the Serbs place military vehicles, including tanks, up against and even inside residential structures to deter NATO air attack. In this case, of course, there's no way of knowing with certainty what was inside the tape. Please roll the Bear 4-2 video. You see the cursors on the target inside the courtyard, the two large vehicles. Stop the tape. He missed his target vehicle, but a trailing vehicle ran off the road behind it. As Bear 3-1 coordinated for more fighter support to attack the convoy, his wingman, Bear 3-2, attacked and destroyed one of the vehicles. Upcoming is video of that attack. Note that a direct hit from a GBU-12 does not leave much evidence. Please roll Bear 3-2's video. Stop the tape. Next is a simultaneous attack with two bombs, one a hit and one a miss in a field adjacent to the road. You'll note that in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. And continue to run the video through the remainder of the attacks, please. There's the miss off to the right. There are attacks against moving and stationary vehicles during this period.
Assuming this is taken care of, but they have put aluminum matting down. The area where the actual American task force will be located is in a little bit of a lower area of that Tirana area, so the mud, etc., has accumulated, and this is part of the reason it's taken a little time to get there. Mother Nature. Just a couple of images. This is an image in northwest Kosovo of a refugee convoy moving down the road. You can see several vehicles. This is a vehicle convoy of over 100 and they continue to move. That's to the west of Prizren. Additionally, image of a refugee camp. It's not really a camp, it's an area in Kosovo itself that looks, from the photo interpretation, you can't tell from this, but from photo interpreters, that it's actually been attacked by what looks like maybe mortars or damaged vehicles in this area. So a chance that the IDPs may be being attacked in Kosovo itself. And then a photo of an area here in Serbia, an airfield that was attacked yesterday. This building here is fully destroyed. And go back and show you what it looked like the day before. This is the previous day, and this was a military vehicle holding area. You can see where the tracked vehicles were going into this building. It's been destroyed. And then lastly, I'll show you this on cockpit video. This is a bridge at Kosovo, where there was a bomb that hit right at the approach end of this bridge, took that down, and then another one in the middle of it. And that bridge is still standing, but it doesn't look like it's structurally sound now, and probably can't get on the bridge from one end or off the other. So I'll show you imagery of that in a moment. We're going to hit the approach end of the bridge, which is the best way to take it down for a long period of time. F-117, and the imagery, post-strike imagery, is still being analyzed, but it looks like that bridge has been taken down as far as being useful. Next to 117 against a petroleum refinery storage tank. We continue to take down their petroleum, oil, lubrication ability.
What's the blackout on the left?
This is some of the data from the aircraft that I don't want to show you.
Thought so.
This is an attack on this center holding tank. You have to assume there may have been a little damage to the tanks next to it, but we wouldn't call those destroyed yet. Next is a F-18 attack on a fuel tank at the Podgorica airfield. Continue to take down their ability to sustain both ground and air. And that fuel tank looks like it was full. That's destroyed. Next is an F-14 against the Kosovo highway bridge I just showed you. This will be against first the center span, where I showed a hole in the bridge. Just watch under the cursors and over here. And in this case, that F-14 was filming another bomb that went off from his wingman. Next are armored vehicles in Serbia from an F-15E. This aircraft is actually filming the attack from his wingman. You'll see the bombs hit down in this area here. And from photo interpretation later, that looks like those tanks were at least hit, if not destroyed. Petroleum storage pumping facility from an F-117 someplace in Serbia. Once again, under the laser cursor. You'll see that was more than likely destroyed. Once again, it's hard to tell from the imagery whether it was actually destroyed, and we'll follow up with after attack photography. There's a MiG-21 at Pristina Airfield yesterday with an F-16 out of Aviano. You saw General Leaf on TV today earlier. He's doing a great job at Aviano. He's got 171 fighters on the ramp for a base made for 54. This is a buddy lays. You'll see the arrow is actually his wingman attacking that MiG-21. Looks like it was full of fuel, and I'd say it's probably not flyable. Another F-117. Control building, a radio relay site, someplace in Serbia. This is on a mountain. Tough target to find. It's under the cursor. Once again, strategic relay of command and control. Night target. In all likelihood, at least put out of business for a while. Another radio relay site from an F-15E out of Aviano Air Base. LGB, you see the large tower above it. This is going after the actual control facility underneath the cursor. It's a very large tower. He'll hit the control facility first. Some damage to the control facility, if not all. The next is the same target with another F-15E from the same flight, same mission. This was yesterday. And you'll see they're going to drop CBU-87 on this facility. Some hits the tower, some hit the control facility.
Oh my God.
More than likely, probably not transmitting very well. Highway bridge in Kosovo against a F-117, with an F-117, going against the abutment again. You'll see from the bottom the bomb come in. He's aiming here. Here comes the bomb, right here. Looks like a pretty good shot.
Now that's real time, correct?
Except when we pause it, we don't have the ability to stop the bomb in flight. The next is another F-117 against the center span of the same bridge. And this is that bridge I showed you a picture of earlier. He's going after the center span here. And this one you'll see concrete and debris fly through the air afterwards if you look close. So there must have been some damage to the bridge. Large chunks of concrete. Probably structurally not sound anymore. The last one I'll show you is an F-15E against a air defense radar in southern Serbia, optically guided bomb. And this was a target of opportunity. You'll see in this picture there's a church next to the target. The pilot sees that and actually steers the bomb off from the target. Which, if you can do that, it's very fortunate. It's a good thing we can do that.
Daily briefings increasingly feature cockpit videos showing U.S. precision weaponry scoring direct hits on aircraft, bridges, and oil refining and storage facilities in Yugoslavia, along with the repeated assertion the strikes are curtailing the mobility of the Yugoslav military and special police.
So they're starting to hurt. How much they're hurting, I don't know, but you can use your own imagination over time what this kind of attacking would do to the infrastructure and the sustainment they have.
But Yugoslavia is still importing oil through the Montenegrin port of Bar. With NATO allies divided about the legality of enforcing an oil embargo with naval forces, Pentagon sources tell CNN one option is to bomb the piers at the port. But other officials here warn the port might be needed if and when NATO has to rebuild the country. Meanwhile, Yugoslav forces appear to have little trouble getting around, along with the images,
including what amounts to a naval blockade. Another option, Pentagon sources say NATO air power could be used to bomb docks in Montenegro to keep away ships with refined oil. In principle, NATO allies support stepping up the pressure on Serb forces by cutting off their fuel. But the French oppose an oil blockade without a United Nations Security Council resolution. One senior European diplomat said this would be, quote, an act of war on the high seas. U.S.
82nd Airborne are in Albania tonight, less than 60 miles from some of the fiercest fighting in Kosovo. They are not an invasion force, but there to protect the 24 Apache attack helicopters that begin arriving tomorrow. With ground-hugging firepower, Apaches can take out Serb tanks and armor that NATO warplanes often can't see, much less hit from the air. And there are more signs today the air war is not going well for NATO.
Heads for Yugoslavia, but it's likely to bring its bombs back home. Only once have Italian planes actually joined in and attacked Yugoslav targets. Italy insists it is doing its bit, sending 2,000 troops to Albania to help with the refugees. Keeping the conflict at bay is Rome's main worry.
Italy has made a major humanitarian effort. There's great concern for the refugees. There's also a real fear that the crisis could spread. The Albanian coast is just 1 hour from here.
Kosovo operation
is urgent, immediate, clearly in the national interest. There are literally lives hanging in the balance.
The president's request envisions an air war only. The Pentagon's share includes $3.3 billion to cover the costs of deploying U.S. forces to the Balkans, including more than 600 aircraft and 25 warships. $700 million.
It's NATO's first war, a war by committee. Targets not chosen solely by U.S., German, or French military planners, but with the approval of NATO diplomats.
They can vote on everything. And that's the strength and probably the weakness a little bit of what we have going on here. But the beauty of the fact is we're a coalition. This is not one nation against Serbia. And so therefore, as 19 nations, we all have an equal vote.
U.S. officials concede getting a unanimous vote on strategy and tactics makes the military effort a lot more cumbersome. And it partly explains NATO's relative lack of success so far.
Dutch soldiers on a humanitarian mission for NATO bring much-needed assistance. Aid workers at this Italian refugee camp in Kukes are anxious to receive their cargo. In recent days,
troops moved in on April the 4th, there were just 30 of them. Now there are probably closer to 1,000. Precise figures are difficult because each nationality is responsible for its own sector. There are French, Swiss, Dutch and several more. Even the United Arab Emirates has a team here. But by far the biggest contingent is the American one. They, together with the French, have set about transforming the airfield into a semi-permanent military base. The Americans call it Camp Shining Hope. It's a substantial construction project involving equipment more usually found on a building site than a military base.
I didn't know the extent of the challenge at first. The day that I arrived, it was hot and sunny for at least the first 2 days. We didn't realize the problem with drainage and that sort of thing until about 2 days later when it first started raining. And with the amount of traffic that we had in from heavy equipment and just the people walking around, it really turned the area into a swamp, if you will. So we realized a few days into it the challenge we'd be faced with based on the environment.
Local contractors have been used to supply much of the raw material and some of the machinery. Every day for the last 2 weeks, rock and gravel has been arriving here on the American side of the camp at the rate of 30 truckloads a day. They've already brought enough in to cover at least 6 football pitches in 4 inches of stone. And the order to the contractors is keep it coming until we say stop. And that won't be for at least another 4 or 5 days. But preparations are already advanced enough for the first signs that Tirana's airfield may soon have a more aggressive role to play. Rockets arriving to be used by the American Army, probably in support of the Apache strike helicopters, which are also to be based here. David Bowden, Sky News, at Tirana Airfield in Albania.
R-1 Tornado bombers have embarked on airstrikes. The Prime Minister was shown around a fully armed jet on the tarmac and paid tribute to the servicemen and women who risk their lives on a daily and nightly basis.
We give them our thanks and our gratitude, and we say that our thoughts are with them all the time in the missions that they fly. They're risking their lives. We're very conscious of that. But I believe that they are risking their lives in a cause that is just and right. And thank you and all your people here for the work that you have done. It's deeply appreciated by all of us.
In an underground bunker, Mr. Blair also met the aircrew who are due to take part in NATO attacks tonight, although photographs were banned for security reasons.
The situation at the border is tense. There's been a lot of fighting, and it could be dangerous for pilots there. In the meantime, what's happening here, as you look right behind me, a huge stretch of this runway has been cleared. There used to be lots of pallets, lots of food, lots of relief supplies that had cluttered up the runway. But since morning, all these supplies have been moved. This area of the runway is now being dubbed Camp America, and many here expect the Apaches to land here. Of course, the Apache, a very heavy helicopter, it needs a firm landing strip. Apache has a lot of armor on it, and when the Apaches do arrive from northern Italy over the Adriatic, they'll be landing right here, very close to where I'm speaking to you.
Under the impression that we fly in a plane full of aid, land in the middle of a refugee camp, and start handing out food dressed in Santa Claus suits. That just doesn't happen.
What does happen is this. Cargo planes touch down in Tirana, the Albanian capital, on the only major airstrip in the country.
Top U.S. officials now concede the controversial issue of ground troops will be reviewed this weekend at NATO's 50th anniversary summit in Washington. But they still insist their strategy of using air power alone will work.
I am sure the full range of issues involving Kosovo will be discussed, but I believe that the consensus in NATO very clearly is to stay the course.
Several U.S. lawmakers of both parties are proposing a resolution that urges the president not to stay the course, but to plan for ground forces.
I know, as should anyone who votes for this resolution, that if Americans die in a land war with Serbia, we will bear a considerable share of the blame for their loss.
Administration officials privately acknowledge last year's NATO ground troop assessment is now out of date, given the dramatic changes inside Kosovo over the past month. They say the assessment will have to be updated.
We've indicated before, if the military leadership, political leadership believes it should be updated, it can be done so rather quickly.
Presidential aides still hope using ground forces won't be necessary. They acknowledge there's no consensus in the 19-member alliance. And to bolster the air campaign, they say they now want NATO to approve an expanded embargo against Yugoslavia.
Part in the airstrikes over Yugoslavia, and over 3,000 Bundeswehr soldiers are stationed in Macedonia as part of a NATO peacekeeping force, some on the border with Kosovo. There's been much criticism of German involvement at home, but the government says there's no alternative.
Assad's last bridge spanning the Danube River. Yugoslavia's official news agency says a pre-dawn attack caused substantial damage to the structure. 2 other bridges there have already been destroyed. Earlier, I spoke with CNN's Alessio Vinci about other NATO strikes on Wednesday.
The all-clear sirens sounded just a few hours ago, but it was far from a quiet night as NATO missiles hit a well-known building in downtown Belgrade, just across the river from the old city center. The building is known here as the former Central Committee of the Yugoslav Communist Party and now serves as a business center as well as housing the executive offices of Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic's Socialist Party. Also housed in this building are 3 television stations and 2 radio stations. One of the radio stations is owned, as you said, by Maria Milosevic, who is the daughter of President Milosevic. These TV channels broadcast popular entertainment programs like music and movies, and only one has a regular newscast. Though since the beginning of the bombing campaign, they have repeatedly shown video of destroyed civilian buildings and broadcast